So thanks for coming out. We have 3 panelists here. I'm just going to introduce them briefly, and then once I introduce them, I'm going to have them read just something small, if they have, to share.
I don't.
No? Oh, okay. Well, Michael does.
I can pull up the paper.
Yeah. You could read Michael's. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, we'll have Michael read. Eric, no?
Read like something I wrote? Sure. I
I
can Google something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need my phone though. One sec. My parents have it.
Oh,
We'll wait
Great
for
start
the
to
morning.
I like this. This is a good prompt though. I'm just gonna read some of my tweets.
You could, did you say you're going to read tweets?
I was just kidding though.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I have a question.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So, wow, let me turn this down a little bit. So, maybe I don't need it. So let's start by introducing the panelists here. So we have Eric, who's all the way on at the end there. Those of you who don't know, Eric's a 5-time Tally Award-winning writer, director, and showrunner. He's from Southeast Los Angeles. He co-created, wrote, and executive produced The Mexican Beverly Hills. It's a sitcom currently in development at CBS. He co-wrote a screenplay called A Christmas to Remember. It was optioned by Broken English and Grand Dave Studios, right?
Yeah,
Yeah?
that's true.
Okay. He's also the creator, head writer, executive producer of multiple hit podcasts, including The Ballad of Chelino Sanchez, Wild, Out of the Shadows. He's written essays on life and culture for the New York Times and the Los Angeles Times, and is currently the showrunner on Snooze for the NPR station KPCC LAS Studios.
Thank you.
So-
My publicist is really good.
Yeah. So, he was the first managing editor of LA Taco, which is good. How many are you familiar with LA Taco? You gotta love LA. Okay. So, his work won the James Beard Foundation Award. Along with his business partner, Patty Rodriguez, Eric recently launched Sin Miedo Productions to write and produce Latinx stories and podcast TV and film.
Thank you. It is
Okay.
very exciting.
Yeah. So then we have Dorney. Dorney is Dorney writes about books, publishing, and the local literary scene for the Los Angeles Times. During her time at the paper, she's written extensively about LA's Latinx community. She wrote about the 1971 Chicano series that had been stored in a garage for 50 years. Yeah, and was recently digitized. She followed up Paletero for a day to capture the life as a street vendor during the pandemic. That was a really, these are pieces that are up at LA Times. You can read them now. She examined the myth. This is a really one of my favorite pieces. Is she examined the myth of Ruben Salazar for the paper's award-winning project on the 50th anniversary of the Chicano moratorium. Her early dedication to writing about the Latinx community was recognized by the Latino Journalist of California in 2020. She was named one of the most influential Latina journalists in California and the Emerging Latina Journalist of the Year. All right. So finally, we have Michael Jaime Becerra. This is, I don't know why I'm sweating. It's embarrassing.
Okay, I am too.
You guys are the stars. And I'm sweating. Okay. Michael Jaime Becerra is a writer from El Monte, California. This is his second year. He joined us last year. And
Peterson.
yeah, so he's a veteran of Downey City Library and Beyond the Book. He's the author of This Time Tomorrow, a novel named after the Kinks song?
It is actually named after the Kings.
Yeah, such a good song. It's my friend's wedding. So this time tomorrow, it was awarded an International Latino Book Award. And every night is Ladies' Night, collection of shorts. That received the California Book Award for a first work of fiction. His poetry was published in the second run of Gary Soto's Chicano chapbook series. We had Gary Soto here as a visitor. We've had him a couple times, and so that's kind of exciting, interesting connection. His essays have been featured in the Los Angeles Times, on KCRW, and as part of KPCC's Unheard LA series. Recent work you can also find his work at this journal, the literary journal, it's hard to pronounce this,
Ziziva.
Ziziva. Yeah,
Z-Y-Z-Z-Y-V-A.
yeah.
Ziziva. It's like, I think they chose to call it that because it's like the last word in the English alphabet, or the English language. It's the cocoon that like a certain weevil it grows in. Ziziva.
It's interesting, yeah, because I Googled it, and that's what I found. Yeah. That was like the first hit, right? Yeah. Okay, so, yeah. So these are our panelists. So to kick it off, do you guys want to kick it off? Do you guys want to get going?
Wants to go first?
I'll go first, just so I can stop looking at my phone, because that's an addiction. I wrote this piece for the New York Times, and that's what became the TV show that we're developing. And I'll just read a little bit. It's about Downey. It's titled The Mexican Beverly Hills. Came out 2 years ago, right around this time. I was having dinner at some fancy beachside eatery in early March when someone said they had just moved to Downey, a southeast Los Angeles suburb 12 miles south of downtown. The other Latinos at the table oohed. "You finally made it," someone said, "to the Mexican Beverly Hills." In many ways, that is what Downey represents. It's hoity-toity, gilded, and more conservative than surrounding neighborhoods. A status-making place where the average household income at $88,000 is significantly higher than other areas in Los Angeles with a similar ethnic makeup. In East Los Angeles, which is also predominantly Latino, the average income is $56,000, according to census data. If you're wondering what the average income in the white Beverly Hills is, it's $191,000. Downey is the kind of place where many people feel entitled enough not to wear face masks, despite coronavirus infection spikes, where many homes featured "Thank you, Downey PD" banners at the peak of the George Floyd protests, but where an overwhelming majority of its citizens voted for President-elect Joseph R. Biden over President Donald Trump. Man, this is a long time ago. So much has happened since then. I'm like, damn, I don't remember writing that. In short, it's a great example of a place that rebukes the idea of a singular Latino vote or any ideology uniformity among the nearly 61 million people of Latin American descent who live in the United States. Because in the so-called Mexican Beverly Hills, Latinos are not a monolith. And that is kind of the gist of the article. It's just about the many different types of Latino and how Downey is this beautiful place because it lets people connect to their culture, the culture of their parents, their grandparents, their tias or tios, but still have their own singular identity. And I will say, like, at the time when I wrote this article, I really felt like there was all this pressure on Latinos to vote Republican or vote Democrat or, like, support certain candidates or be a certain way, and I really wanted to write something about a place where you can be whoever the hell you are and not have to worry about fitting in, because in Downey, even though it's called the Mexican Beverly Hills or the Latino Beverly Hills, like everybody's very different, and there is no like one thing that connects us other than the fact that we live in Downey. So that you can read the whole article if you want on the New York Times. If anybody needs a login, I'll give them my password.
Just a quick library plug, that with your library card, you get a free subscription to the New York Times.
Damn,
It's awesome.
I'm gonna
You
cancel
get a
my
library
subscription
card,
then.
you log in and you can read Eric's piece. It's really a great piece. It's talked about a lot.
Yeah, it's amazing.
If you know anything about this sort of cultural, sort of, I guess, long-form essays that are written about Los Angeles and the suburbs, Eric's piece is one of those that I hear get mentioned quite a bit.
Didn't know that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's awesome.
I'm having a hard time. The internet's being really slow, so I can't pull something up.
You want me to go?
Do you wanna-
I'll go first and you can come back.
Yeah, hopefully.
All right. So I'm a contributor to this book recently called East of East, Making the Greater El Monte. So I'm from up to 605, just off of like Valley Boulevard in the city of El Monte. The editors of this book are a couple writers that I've known for a while, Romeo Guzman and Caribbean Fragosa. And I had lunch with Caribbean many years ago now, and they were talking about just this idea they had about landmarks in the city, places that they wanted writers or people from Southern California to write about. And so I immediately knew what I wanted to write about. I wanted to write about Golfland, which was the arcade that I spent a lot of time at off of Peck Road as a kid. And so this is my contribution to this. So I'll read the start of that. It's called 1181 Durfee Avenue, 1983 to 1986. Between the 4th and 6th grades, you are seized by 3 deep and compulsive obsessions: Marvel comic books, all things Daredevil and X-Men and Spider-Man, BMX bicycles, yours a second-hand mongoose, unwieldy and spray-painted black after you strip the frame down to its bare chromoly tubing, and video games. Your parents find all 3 activities doubtful. Comic books are allowed since they get you reading something else besides Mad Magazine and therefore seem remotely educational. And when you're on your bicycle, you're out of the house, out of your parents' way, and doing something sort of athletic, even if the extent of this athletic activity is you and your friends racing up and down Parkway Avenue, seeing whose tires can leave the longest skid, and assembling ramps from plywood scraps. One day, your friends will shove a few extra bricks under one of these ramps, raising it higher than they're willing to attempt, and you won't notice. Moments later, you'll fly higher and farther than ever, sailing beautifully, historically, over lengths of sidewalk, and then you'll crash into the low brick wall dividing the Delgado and Murillo properties, knocking the wind out of your lungs and fracturing a rib that will bend forever outward. Your parents are most resistant to video games because they have no redemptive value, a waste of quarters, a waste of time. You are not allowed an Atari, no Intellivision or ColecoVision either. The closest thing you have is a nameless knockoff presented one Christmas by your estranged grandfather. His presence in your life is shadowy and distant. He does not know about video games being unwelcome. This beige console lets you play 3 blocky, black and white variations of Pong. Since you already know the good stuff, it entertains you for less than an hour. There are other arcades, Chuck E. Cheese on the north side of town, Showboat in Puente Hills, and somewhere off the 605 freeway, Downey, Golf and Stuff Fun Center, which you've never visited, yet exists in your elementary school imagination with a golden mythological glow. I'll stop there.
It finally loaded. Yeah. So I wrote this piece titled LA Ice Cream Vendor Adapts to Life in the COVID-19 World. The summer of 2020, just as the pandemic was kind of upending everyone's lives. And one of the first story ideas I had with my editor was to follow Paletero in LA and see how his work and his life had been impacted by the pandemic. So I'll read a few paragraphs from that story. A photographer and I spent 7 hours basically shadowing him throughout his route in Pico Union, and this is the story that I wrote that came from that. For the past 16 years, Mauro Rios Para has ridden his bike to a warehouse on Washington Boulevard to start his day as a paletero. And every day for 16 years, he's stuffed the same push cart with more than 300 ice creams and fruit bars. Coconut, tamarindo, pineapple, hibiscus, coffee, lemon, mamey, sapote, nance, and his personal favorites, vanilla and strawberry. Then there's the ice cream cups and sandwiches, the Choco Tacos, the Tweety and Spider-Man, and Ninja Turtle bars with gumball eyes. Under a recent cloudy morning sky, Rios, 63, holds the door of Barahona Ice Cream in Pico Union wide open. Into the warehouse, workers wheel a giant blue chest filled with dry ice and dozens of boxed frozen treats. Pico Union is his home and his turf. Tucked a few miles west of downtown, it's one of the poorest and densest neighborhoods in LA, with some 45,000 people squeezed into 1.67 square miles. Given that physical distance is one of the best safeguards against the coronavirus, it has also been one of the hardest hit by the highly contagious disease. And then it goes on to kind of details about his route and his personality and his life. In LA as an immigrant, he was born and raised in Oaxaca. He left his family behind there so that he can find, more economic opportunities here. And so he hadn't seen his family in like 16 years when I met him. It's a very powerful story.
So I was trying to think when you were talking, when you were reading your piece, I was trying to think about like the common thread between all of the work that you just read. And I think one of the things that stands out is that all of you write it to some extent about people and places and culture, I guess, is embedded in that. But so why? I guess the question is, why do you write about that? There's lots of writing, right? You could write Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, but you choose to write about something that is sort of drenched in reality.
I do it to cope, because reality is, it's been not always easy. And I think I started to write about real life for two reasons. Number one is because I wanted to hold on to those very, very beautiful moments and save them in glass forever. And for the moments that are not so nice, I wanted kind of to make sense of them and process them, and also to give dignity to something that maybe doesn't seem on the surface like it's super cool or super nice. So, yeah. Also, I don't think I could write Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, but yeah, that's why I do it.
Well, as a reporter, my work is very much rooted in reality and what's happening in communities and how individuals are impacted by X, Y, and Z. But I think what really makes people care about big issues like the pandemic and the climate crisis is telling very human stories, is getting someone's emotion about how they're being impacted by, something like COVID or something like climate change or injustices like that, is telling the kind of human story of these big issues is essentially what makes people care about them. And I think that engages readers a lot more.
Yeah, I think for me, I was nodding along as Eric was speaking because I felt like I started a lot of my writing in response to the ugliness in the world out there, and really specifically anti-Latinx sentiment. A real turning point for me as a younger writer was Prop 187, which just had its anniversary. And Prop 187 was based on a lot of anti-Latinx hatred, really. And I felt like I worked with this guy. I worked at UPS at the time, and my job was to load boxes at the UPS outpost in Riverside. I worked with this guy who was also Latino, but he was very enamored with Rush Limbaugh, and would come in the morning and would drop down and do 20 push-ups before we started to show off, and then get up, and he would spend the morning just repeating Rush's talking points. And I was like, dude, you're wrong. And so that was, at that point, like I knew that I'd always wanted to write as a kid, but I knew I wanted to write and I wanted to publish, and that was a goal of mine, was to publish because I wanted to write about the world that I knew, the people that I knew, and I wanted other people to know them, so that was, in whatever way possible, like something to run counter to my work neighbor doing push-ups and quoting Rush Limbaugh. And so it was really important for me just to be able to write, to learn to write, to learn to write as well as I could, and to get other people to see those stories, and that's remained really my mission ever since as a writer, and then now as a teacher to sort of pass that on to other people.
Yeah, we may have worked with that same guy. I think I worked with him.
Yeah.
I worked at UPS too. I came in contact with someone
Yeah.
just like that.
Yeah, he wore military boots, like surplus boots, and would drop down and like do 20s and pop up and like do this machine grunt of marine grunts and like just start repeating these ugly things. And I'm like, dude, like you're wrong. Like you're wrong. Like, the people I know aren't like that. Like, the people I know are amazing. Like my dad came here with nothing, and I don't know. Yeah, he was just wrong.
What's kind of cool is that I think a lot of what all of you are sort of saying is, to some degree, about, like, I don't want to say like righting wrongs, but like you're literally trying to write like a history or a story that sort of maybe corrects false narratives that exist. Whether it's like what Eric was saying about like places that don't get a lot of attention, kind of calling attention to those, or at least like making them a subject.
Yeah.
Right? Or Dorney the same way. There's just something.
I just want to say, like, I mean, your article in the New York Times, it blew me away. Like, I was so happy to see it. Like, I don't know you. We were meeting for the first time today, but just like seeing Downey in the New York Times and getting that much page space was like an amazing moment. Like, I felt like we had won just seeing that in that place.
Thanks, man. So nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Like
mean,
I talk about that piece a lot to people, and just like the idea that like this is the guy that like Downey was in the New York Times. Like, I mean, the existence of like this city, these people, this way in that venue is like it's an amazing accomplishment.
yeah, you know, I called the New York Times. This is kind of a funny story. They had just published. If you read the New York Times a lot, they sometimes will publish a piece about LA, and they'll talk about like nobody walks, and nobody's really from here, and there's no culture.
Yeah.
And I literally read a piece like that, and I called my editor at the New York Times, and I was like, "Yo, you guys are gonna get us killed, like,
Yeah.
real talk, because people aren't gonna think we're human.
Yeah.
Like they're gonna think we're cartoon characters." And I was like, I want to write. I have this essay that I wrote. I had written this essay, and I wasn't sure why I wrote it. I just literally had dinner. Like I had a dinner, and someone was talking about Mexican Beverly Hills, and so I wrote this piece. And I was like, I need you to publish this piece because you guys are gonna get like, especially people of color killed in Los Angeles. And they were like, yeah, let's do it. And then like my dad was in the bathroom, and he's like. Where he was trying to rush to the bathroom, and he goes, "Ay, me estoy cagando," like, and I'm just like on the phone, and I'm like, "Oh my god, damn, I'm talking to the New York Times." He goes, "I don't care, I gotta take shit." And I was just like, "Oh my god," but I was just like, I really wanted to tell about like the people who are from here,
Yeah,
you know, the people who don't like, who are real people, you know, and I do think that is a great point that like. You know, there's not many portraits of nuanced pictures of, like, especially Southeast LA that I have seen growing up, you know, and I thought we were, like, the worst. Like, I don't know what we were. Like, I just didn't think we existed in the world. And so, like, I have tried to dedicate my career to putting us in the history books, you know, and I think that the New York Times is the paper of record,
Yeah.
like, for our, not just the United States, but for the world.
Yeah.
And so I was always trying to get stuff in there, you know. And now hopefully as a TV show, it does the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like, and you know, strategically, like we really had some options with the TV show, and we picked CBS because it is the biggest network in the world, you know, and their audience is like middle America, and it's very old and very white, and
Yeah.
I want them to see Downey. You know?
Exactly.
Like,
Exactly.
Because it's one thing to like talk here and preach to like people that already believe what you're saying, but you want to like like Dorney said, like you want to get to people through a story and say like, hey, like, you know, guess what? We are very much American. We're very much like deserve the same rights and dignity that everyone else in this country does. And if the only reason you don't believe that is because you've never heard of us, or you've never seen us portrayed that way, well, then we're about to change that for you, you know. And so that has been like a very intentional goal with every piece of work that I do.
Yeah.
Have any of you seen this? There's a film by Tom Anderson called Los Angeles Plays Itself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Have you seen this? You're familiar with this?
yeah.
But like he has there's a whole segment in this. The film is about how it's a documentary about how LA is misrepresented, and then there's this really interesting segment where it basically like cuts to all these like Woody Allen movies and all these like big time Hollywood movies where they're just taking a big crap on LA in the suburbs. So just like
Yeah.
everyone here is fake, everyone here is dumb. There's no literature here, there's no art here, and it's just like 5 minutes of just like continuous things chopped up.
Yeah.
So I find that fascinating that
Yeah.
you know as a motivation.
Yeah, LA. Nobody's from LA except the people who founded LA are all indigenous and people of Mexican descent, and all these, you know, the Chinese built the railroads here. Like, it's crazy that they think that, but that is because stories are so powerful that if they've heard the same story over and over again, it's become the truth.
Yeah.
You know, and that is why, you know, it's important to try and tell different stories. You know, and that even though it's, you know, I think it'd be really easy. I mean, not easy, but like it'd be, you know, sci-fi Marvel movies. You know, they talked about that earlier. They're super dope, and it could be cool to make a Marvel movie and all that. But it's also like, I want to like, what about the regular people, real life people, real stories? Because those are the stories people are gonna hear over and over again. You know, and so that is a very interesting point. Yeah.
And all of you are working up with like with the LA Times and then New York Times and now CBS and Michael with like publishing these like books with large publishers. It's like all of you are working with like mainstream channels to some degree, which I think is important too. Would you say? Or
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that was, I mean, with Ladies Night, the first book, this came out a while ago now, like 2004. But that was my goal. My goal is the way you're talking about the New York Times. Like I wanted to be published by one of the 5 houses, like one of the 5 publishing houses in New York. And so this is a HarperCollins book, but it exists as a HarperCollins book because my editor at the time was this guy Rene Alegria, and he was bored with his job, and he's like, I need to do something with like Latino gente, and so he put together a business plan and pitched it to HarperCollins. They're like, well, I guess we can make money doing it. And so and that was really that's really what it came down to. Is like he, you know, the higher ups at HarperCollins saw this business plan, and he convinced them that he could make money selling books about, you know, by Latinos to Latinos, and that was the goal of the imprint. So there was an imprint at HarperCollins for a little bit in the mid 2000s called Rayo, and that was his imprint, and that's how I got in at that level. With the second book is with St. Martin's. There's another big New York house. And there was a woman at the time who was an editor there. Her name was Toni Plummer. And she just happened to be from El Monte. And she was best catechism friends with a woman named Rosa Peña that I went to elementary school with. And she came back from New York and was having coffee with Rosa. And Ladies Night had come out, and she knew about it. And she said, do you know this? Have you heard of this book? She's, yeah, I went to school with him. And she said, here's my email, like left it on a Post-it note. Rosa took it to the elementary school where my mom was working at the time, like handed her this Post-it note and said, if this woman wants to know if your son's working on anything. And so jump forward, several years, 2008, which people probably remember was a really bad time financially. And for publishing, it was a terrible time to try and publish something, especially something literary, especially something about brown people, especially something about brown working class people. Like this was not the time to go out with that book. But that's the time that I had the book to go out with. And so I sent her an email. I had that Post-it note saved for a rainy day. The rainy day was here. I wrote to Toni saying, hi, my name is Michael Jaime Becerra. I have this book coming out that's going to be sent out soon. Would you like to look at it first? And she literally wrote me back 2 minutes later and said, yeah, like, please send it. and so the book exists because of that.
Wow.
So yes, on the one hand, like I'm proud of those accomplishments. I'm gonna take Melissa Villaseñor to post your accomplishments thing and remember that, because I forget about that. But like the fact that I really wanted those to exist at that level, just so that they could be seen by as big an audience as possible. The way you're talking about CBS and CBS's audience in that way. Now I get to do like book clubs at a school, or speak at a university, or talk to a book club online. I did a book talk in Ohio when Ladies Night came out. I did a book talk over the phone for some old women in Ohio, and like I had no idea how they heard about me. It might have been my dad, who was a promoter, a weird promoter at the time for the book. But like those are people that I would never, my stories, the characters in my books, would never been in contact with them if it hadn't been being published at that level.
I like your parents. Your parents are hustling for you.
My dad did, yeah. I actually wrote about this for the LA Times for Father's Day, where when my dad was pretty unsupportive, I'll be honest. He was unsupportive of my career choices to be a writer. But when the book came out, like it was something tangible that he could hold and understood as like an accomplishment. And so he was traveling back and forth to see family in Chihuahua, see family in Querétaro, see family in Juarez, and he was just like taking the book with him wherever he went. Like my son looked at the book. And he was telling them like, my dad was a meat cutter for 27 years, and he somehow wound up with a briefcase. Not a briefcase kind of guy, but he took this briefcase and would sit in bus stations. He traveled by bus in Mexico a lot. Bus stations, airports, bars, like just pop up in the briefcase and be like, oh, like, this is my son's book. And he'd be like,
It's like Forrest Gump.
yeah, and he was just what are you doing here with this book? And he would lie. He would just tell him, I'm scouting spots for his international book tour. There was no international book tour. And so that's the only way I can sort of think about is that this book club in Ohio I heard about is that someone was there in Querétaro, like expatriate or hanging out, and like brought it home, brought news of it home, and so I ended up doing this book club.
That's so dope, man. That's a great story.
Jordan, what about you? Like, you write for the LA Times. How do you sort of, I guess, get to do the stories you want to do, and how do you also feel about writing for a big publication? It's a big publication, particularly here in Southern California. It's something that's relied upon for news and information. And how do you?
Yeah. I mean, I feel a huge responsibility. Legacy media, including the LA Times, has historically written about communities like Bell and Downey and Southeast LA in very reductive, very stereotypical, very dehumanizing ways. And that's true for communities of color across the board. And having this platform, I feel a big responsibility, and as do a lot of journalists of color at the paper, to undo some of the harm that the LA Times has done to these communities. They often, there have been times where I'm reporting on the ground and I tell people that I'm from the LA Times, and they're like surprised that we're there, surprised that we care. Some people are reluctant to talk to me because they don't trust reporters, and you can't blame them. So I feel a big responsibility to kind of help undo the harm that the LA Times has done to our communities.
So it makes me think. So I have this question written down that's related to what you just said, and it was basically about like there's this idea of a writer. I don't know where I got it from, but this like romantic perhaps idea of a writer that just is like kind of slaving over a typewriter, alone in this dingy apartment that's like writing with like a bottle of whiskey next to him, and just totally alienated. Maybe goes down to a bar. Maybe I read too much.
No.
Bukowski story.
Yeah,
I definitely played that part. Yeah.
yeah. So this idea, they go down to a bar and they're miserable and whatever, right? But they're just lonely and they're almost disconnected from people. So there's this like also when you write, you got to be alone. Well, do you have to be alone? I guess that's my question. Is how do you sort of think about your writing, and then does it disconnect you from people a little bit? Does it allow you to reconnect to people? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think all of us probably have that vision of a writer somewhere,
Yeah.
like Charles Bukowski, just sad man of the world. I mean, Yeah, as a kid, I thought that's what I was supposed to be. I thought I was supposed to be sad to be good at art.
Yeah.
You know? Like, but I do think, again, that's just like a story we're all told because, you know, I think for a long time I was like somebody who did not like himself. And I thought that had to be that, you know? And I thought it was like a great gift that I didn't like myself because it made me a better writer. And a lot of that has to do with growing up as like a redheaded Mexican, you know, being bullied a lot, and like redheads don't fit in even with white people, like they definitely don't fit in with brown people. So, but I think, you know, once I did like the work and I did some therapy and I did some healing and I really came to find a great deep love for myself, my work actually got better, you know, and I was able to try and focus on things that can be inspirational to people and write in a very collective way. And yeah, like I was the guy who didn't want an editor, you know. I was like, I don't need an editor. Like, they don't get me, you know. and now when like I have an editor and I'm like, oh, they don't get me. I gotta fix this. Like, you know, like I gotta add clarity to this. So that's one of the things I love about like now writing in TV is you actually write collaboratively. You write in a room, and it's so much easier to have other people there and be like, yo, that's not funny, or you know what if they did this, and like I have an idea, and it just takes a lot of the pressure off, you know. So I would say like, do you know, be whoever you are, like, but don't feel like you have to be a certain way in order to write or in order to do anything, you know. Just like, because like the stuff we do that's not, it can be really easy to focus on outside things, but if you don't let the outside world sway you one way or the other, then you're gonna be chill. You know, you're gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay whether like you win an award, it's not gonna go to your head, or whether you get rejected, which happens a lot to writers. Like, you know, even I'm sure to you, right? Like a lot of stuff gets kicked back, right?
Yeah, it's all covered in red.
Yeah.
You're like, why am I a writer?
Yeah, exactly. I suck. Yeah, but it's like you can think about that, but then you're like, what I do is not who I am. You know?
Well, how do you deal with rejection? Because rejection's tough. How do you deal with it?
Like Kobe, bro, you shoot another shot. You know, you just keep going. Like if you focus on the rejection, yeah. But if you keep going and do another one, then I think that's how I deal with it, at least. Because I get rejected like every day, like because I'm pitching all the time, and like I'm just like, okay, cool, and like because it's something I like to say, like I'm the dopest person I know. Like you be the dopest person you know, I'm the dopest person I know. So if somebody's like, I don't like this, I'm like, I feel sorry for you.
Yeah.
Because that shit is fire. Like, and then I'm gonna take it somewhere else. You know, like Chalino podcast, I got rejected by everybody. I got rejected by the LA Times, by the company that I worked at, LAist. They rejected it, and I was like, and they were like, we don't want to see this vision of Latinos, right? It's a stereotype. You know, Chalino Sanchez, if you don't know who he is, he was a guy who sang narco corridos, and they're like, it's a stereotype. And I'm like, it's a stereotype because it's only been told as a stereotype. Like, let me tell it the way it's supposed to be told, right? With nuance and dignity, like The Godfather, right? Yeah. Like The Sopranos, you know? And I had to, like, basically do this for free, you know, and put it out there. And it was, like, the #1 podcast in Mexico, and it was, like, in the top 50 podcasts in the world. And, like, it's, like, in the top podcasts in, like, Singapore, Australia, like, everywhere.
That's wild.
I know, it's crazy, right? But that podcast, if I would have just taken the no and been, like, sad for myself, I wouldn't have got it made. But I was just like, all right, cool, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep taking it everywhere, until finally somebody was like, yeah, we'll make it, but we're not going to give you any money. And I'm like, it's okay. Because in the long run, it's gonna slap, and it's gonna be good, and people are gonna love it, you know. And so I just keep going, man.
How do you deal with it?
Me or you want to go first?
I just take the punches, and you keep going and you deal with imposter syndrome. Like me personally, every day of my working life, but you know, when it doesn't paralyze me, I use it as a fuel under my ass to like get better and keep going and keep pitching stories that I care about. Because at the end of the day, you know, I'm doing this for myself and so that other people can hopefully see themselves in the stories that I write and the platform that I have. So yeah, I think about myself or I think about the people I'm writing it for and remind myself why it matters.
Yeah, I think yes to everything that's been said. I think I do my version of that, and then I just think about like how I got here. I think about my father. I think about my grandmother, his mom, and like what they went through, and like getting rejected by someone who is not at all on that level. And I feel like the sacrifices that they made put me in this position, and like I have to keep going because of it. That's not saying that it's easy or that it's emotionally, you know, like it's challenging. I'm not gonna lie about that. It's difficult, but at the same time, like I believe in the mission. The mission is that more people see brown people, and like the only way that's gonna happen is if we write the stories. So you got to keep going.
The mission helps for sure.
Yeah.
It's bigger than you.
No, it's big. Yeah, I 100% believe it's bigger than me at this point. Like when I started, like you know, before Ladies Night, it was all about like I want me to be seen, right?
Yeah.
And then now it's at this point. I mean, we've all lived in the world. We know what it's like to be brown in this world right now. It's not easy, and I feel like my mission, like I teach it at UCR, which is technically a Hispanic serving institution, but in many ways, I'll be honest, it's not. And my mission is to like try and change that with the students that I see, the students that I work with. One of the books that I brought props because one of the questions like, what are you looking forward to reading? And I'm looking forward to reading this. This is a chapbook of poems called Grief Logic by a woman named Crystal Salas. That is a graduate student from our MFA program. And I'm proud to say that I got to see these poems in manuscript form. I'm proud to say that like I was able to advise on them and offer insights on like, let's center your culture, let's center your experience in this. Let's use these words instead of these other words. And she's won this award for it, and this book just came out. So it is the mission. For me, the mission is like this bigger mission, like more in whatever way possible, sitcoms, journalism, poems. Like I just want the stories out there.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's cool. That's inspiring. Thanks. We're at our end, but I want to, just before we end, I had one last question. We could do it really quickly, but I just thought for any aspiring writers out there, I just wanted to see if you all could share maybe a piece of advice or something you've learned along the way that was sort of transformed you as a writer or has helped you.
I always say be very specific. Like, don't try to tell everyone's story. It can be very tempting, especially if you get like somebody's like, "Yeah, come tell me a story that you want to tell a story that they're gonna like."
Yeah.
Just tell something that you really like and that only you can tell. I think that has been like the secret to my success is just like focusing on my specific story.
I think for me, maybe find a mentor. I wouldn't be at the LA Times if it wasn't for the professors and the mentors that I met at ELAC when I was studying journalism, who kind of really guided me along the way and encouraged me to continue pursuing this. I think surrounding yourself with people who believe in you and who believe your talent and who believe you can go really far really makes a big difference. It's finding those mentors.
Yeah, I would second both of those, and I would add to it. The cliche is like write what you know. People say write what you know, and my alteration to that is like write what you love, but then also like write toward the absences. Like write where like you see a story like, oh, that's not the way it is, or this is the way it should be. Like write toward those spots and write to those spots. If you have the intersection of like writing toward an absence and writing about something you love, like that's the sweet spot. Like that's, and aim for that. Like that's the thing